Having easy access to a detailed inventory of their infrastructure is a critical requirement for most administrators. With Lenovo XClarity Administrator, infrastructure managers can quickly gain a high-level or a detailed understanding of each hardware element in their environment. Let's take a closer look. Starting here at the dashboard page, we already have a good summary of what our infrastructure looks like. We can see the servers, storage, our network switches, our flex chassis, and even our racks. Let's look at each of these in a little bit more detail. Let's start with the server view. So we can see from here a large table with a fair amount of information already at this level. And by the way, anytime you see a big table like that, it's easy enough to select in the upper left-hand corner and export this data that we can then later use in other asset management tools, importing whatever data that we need. If I'm looking for a particular server here, the easiest way to find it is to use the filter and simply begin to type whatever I know about the system, its name, IP address, serial number. From there, I can select onto the individual system, and now we see some of that same information we had in the table, plus a little bit more. Also notice a free text field in here where I can put in additional information I might want to record about that machine. And then down the bottom, beginning to see what's installed inside, a couple of 14-core processors, 4 DIMMs, 6 drives, 3 cards. If I want more detail on that, I can select into the inventory here, and now I can see even more detail on the asset information itself. I can see the individual processors, specifically power supplies down to power supply serial number, the RAID drives that are installed, right? All of that detailed hardware inventory I might want to have. I'll also notice that from here we have a few actions that we can access right from the inventory page. So if I needed to launch out to a remote console or power cycle the system, that's also available from that inventory view. So that's a server. Let's look at some of these other devices. Let's look at a storage device. And as we access the detailed storage page, we again see some of the basics here on the first page. And then as I click into the more detailed inventory view, I can see what my connectivity to the device is, the network ports, my host ports, and all the way into what you would expect on a storage device, right? Being able to see all the individual drives that we have inside the enclosure. Again, we can have access to some actions from here if I need to power cycle individual controllers, if I need to launch into the detailed configuration tool for the storage device. All that's also available launching from that inventory page. So we've looked at servers, storage. Let's look at a switch. Select one of our network switches here. Once again, very consistent in terms of the types of information that we get on the first page. We can click into inventory. We can see more detail, for example, on this particular asset. And then what might be important from a switch perspective is to see the ports. And so I can see many pages of ports here. And from a control point of view, again, we have the actions, or in this case, we can easily select an individual port and do things like enable and disable individual ports inside the switch. So a lot of good detailed information as well as some control points from an inventory perspective. Now, both of those instances, or all three of those instances, we're looking at things starting from a list view. What if I wanted a more graphical view? So, for example, if I'm managing one of my flex chassis, I can get that chassis level view, seeing the front of the chassis here on the left, the back of the chassis over on the right. We can access individual switches, for example, or we can access the individual servers. And then if I'm interested in more detail, I can simply double click into any one of these and you go right back to that same detailed view that we saw just a moment ago. So that's the navigation from a chassis viewpoint. Same thing from a rack perspective. Of course, the rack, you've got to actually build the rack view, right? So I can simply select Edit Rack, and I can select and drag the different objects that are inside of this rack to the proper location. And then it saves that view for me. But just as before, right, we've got a mixture of things in here. We've got a network switch, we've got a storage device, and any of the individual things that I want to then get more detail on, I can simply double click into it as I do on this server. And once again, we're right back at that same detailed detailed server inventory view for that particular object. So that's a quick look at understanding the infrastructure inventory using XClarity Administrator. It really gives you quick and easy access to detailed data on Lenovo servers, storage, and networking objects.